Hello, what a fine day today. How are you doing out there in the world? I hope it's well. Thanks for being with us today. I'm Empty Turtle. I'm here with Dr. Jubb, and this is jubbtalk. Dr. David Jubb, could you please say hello to everybody before we get into it?
Good to be here with you, Empty. Yeah, it's pretty amazing always. It's a general thing. People have a good feeling around you because you're so empty, you know.
Thank you very much. And I try not to be so influential about it. Anyways, today, folks, we got a good one. We are ready to rock with the criminal history of... Wait a minute, that's not right. The criminal...
Yes, it is.
Obfuscation of our history.
Oh, well, that's a different heading.
Could you say that? Could you say it correctly and tell everybody
obfuscation.
What it means? The criminal obfuscation of our history.
Obfuscate.
Could you please educate
to obfuscate.
Us? Tell everybody what it means.
Well, it just means to really hide, you know, to obscure, to point out what's not about something, you know, and it really is. So we won't be able to have rendered what the truth is, because that could be mutually beneficial, but where something is going to be beneficial for somebody but not beneficial for us.
So basically, what we're saying is that our history is not accurately
clear, purposefully
given to us. It's not clear purposefully.
It's unclear.
Unclear purposefully.
Yeah. Is it okay that
it's criminal.
We live in a world where
it's
you don't have...
that we do not know our own history.
Transparency. Yeah.
Oh, we do not have that.
Well, where a corporation is itself, it's sort of like an entity. Mm-hmm. It's a utility company sort of thing.
And our countries are not countries. They are corporations.
Right. Well, yes. But no, because we the people are here, and we didn't select, but we can, like a Republic of Peace sort of thing.
If they let us. They let us this time.
Well, what if you knew that when you look down at a cell, it looks like Mexico City?
Okay. I had no idea.
You got little cabs running everywhere, delivering things. You've got suitcases and flight craft bags that are ready for transport, you know, and proteins made to move things and what have you. And that it really is like Mexico City when you're looking down at a cell.
Now, is that the cab driver?
Well, the cab driver, in fact, is outside the DNA. The cab driver might be not the DNA, in fact, actually, but the cab itself, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But somebody's driving the cab. That's right.
Anyways, let me ask you.
So the cabs could look all the same, right? But there's differences. Yes, they sort of get worn, but eventually, you know, you can really see there's differences between them. They're not performing the same, maybe.
Now,
but they look the same.
Well, I'll tell you this. Let me ask you this, because we're talking about the obfuscation of our history, the criminal. Why do you suspect that our history is being criminally obfuscated?
Well, it never isn't under a monopoly that's allowed, and that's part of the reason why, all of us, common sense of things, we generally frown upon monopoly because it's inefficient. It's totally inefficient. But if somebody got advantage and it became a predatorial environment, and so would you say that all the corporations being set up to kind of be against each other as competition sort of thing?
Not only against each other, but against the citizens, the people that got them there.
Well, you and I, we might not put that into
customers that got them there.
One side wins, the other lose sort of thing.
Well, Okay. Everybody can win in my society.
Yeah. So the cell itself has sentience, you see?
Okay, now that's interesting. A cell is aware of itself? Is that what you're saying?
It has a consciousness, and it has a capacity to be able to retreat from adversity and to move towards something like a piece of toast that it could get cleaned up.
Cells.
Like a phagocytic cell can travel toward a bit of spaghetti or something that was indigested.
Our individual cells have consciousness.
Yes, they do.
Individual consciousness.
That sentience is really like a gene editing. It's sort of like the words are still there, but the editing between the words has caused a different meaning.
Oh, my goodness.
So, for instance, if I could just say to you, like the words, you baked this pie like grandma, and so that just is sort of straight. It's not too much that you get from it. But if I said, you bake that pie just like grandma. So now it's sort of, you've emphasized just. And so something is exclusionary, you see? Yeah, so the way that something was said. So, for instance, if I said if I said MT, it doesn't go anywhere too much. But if I said MT,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so when we go up, we create a question more, don't we? So those inflections and these sorts of things is like gene editing in a manner that the words are still there, but the editing between the words has been changed so that you're ending up with a different meaning.
Okay.
Than what's supposed to be.
Now, how is this
or what's better, maybe sometimes, to mean something.
Give me some examples of the criminal obfuscation of our history. Give me some good examples. How about JFK? The assassination.
Well, we could certainly go into politics in a second, in a moment, but then we could say like what happens to children who are taken. First, it was in the 80s that they said only one parent, so they prepared people to actually be the father's extracted, because the father is the executor of the will, and if the Goober Nation can take over the executor
Did they
of
really
the
say
child,
that though in the 80s? Where we can be a one-parent family?
Yeah, it was during a feminist movement sort of thing.
Really?
Yes.
And so that was the setup in the 80s, because in the 90s they put a lot of people in jail.
Everybody was in the 80s starting to fear having children, because it meant that you'd be married to a corporation, and so it was fascism, you see? Yes? Fascism outright is where what's corporate is mixed in with the living, and the corporate is what made the decision, not you or I who was living, and it can't. It's the living people that was above that designed that somewhat, or sometimes like where we are, it's a mess because there's not a proper union like there should be in common law or international relation. So it's wrong that a private corporation could just blow up a pipeline, but use sort of
all the time.
The corporate, in a manner of speaking, government sort of attention to create something that's like this, but then have plausible deniability, which isn't, because all the training and everything that went on and things like this. But if the ultimate thing is that your mates all of a sudden have to pay double for energy because of it, and then they're buying energy from you, is there some benefit that actually happened for your own self fully? Way more, but is that what goes on where asymmetric warfare is, you see? And who's planned that? None of us, you see. Yes? So if you look up the Abelin paradox, you can see that somebody else made the rules. We're all having to go along with it, and we don't like the rules, but we're given a circumstance which we don't have any great ability to be able to manage disagreement.
So let me ask you this, because some of these rules, say we're talking about oil, some of these rules have been around for decades. So
Well, the rule of
you say
scarcity, which wasn't or isn't, but once something was put to be a fossil, suddenly everybody's thinking in terms that's something that would run out, and is that a reason why it's all right to put the price up? Because it would be zero barrels a long time ago, and we were done for.
Yeah, if we run out of this stuff,
and
blah,
so
blah, blah.
you know,
Well, they don't.
these are the kinds of things
out.
which is going on. You've got an obfuscation of history, but wouldn't you say that where somebody's just sitting there, you know, and they're having an altered experience? Let's say they had some mushrooms or something, and
All right.
or ayahuasca or whatever. But
Okay.
they're sitting there, and do you have a feeling that most of these people have got a string of events behind themselves?
Sure. You
And
got
that-
to find the mushrooms.
No, but when you're sitting there, you're just like in an open state of consciousness. I'm just saying, most people are sitting there, but they've got a string of events behind themselves, which is kind of their identity, which is which is a false identity. So his story or her hystericalness is control. So where somebody knows about your hysterical or historicalness, it's to do with control. So if I know something about your history, it's possible for me to dissociate you from where you were. It also is possible for me to direct you somewhere by dissociating and leaving certain choices, which is not a proper choice, which we'll talk about in a second. But also just three more things, and then you might have something to say there. But control is the reason for this, MT.
Well, that was my question. The reason for the criminal obfuscation of our history is for control over us.
Absolutely, because, well, when you redact or you change things, it shows motivation. It shows your motive that's behind something.
And who's
If you're-
always redacting?
well,
Our government.
You've got an organisation which is running everything, and that's and it's a planned obfuscation, which you can see that's going on. So, for instance, when statistics would want to come out because someone saw that there was adversity that went on where vaccination was, for instance, nobody's going to say that all of that wasn't covered over. But nobody's going to say also that 9/11 hadn't happened, or that fraud was where an election was and has been and is. And to say that, this one is okay, but the other one wasn't.
Well,
and, but,
so that's a good example.
None. And even
That's a
this
great
one,
example.
okay,
Now,
or not. You see?
When we were being fed the vaccination, all that stuff, the vaccine or whatever, during the whole COVID thing, that was obfuscation in motion. We were actually seeing it in real time because they were telling the text companies to censor anybody that had a different perception of the vaccine.
Yeah, so first, how can we do things? We can have slippery slope, which is a fallacious form of reasoning, meaning that we can say something existed when it doesn't, and we don't have to talk about it existing. We could go on to talk like it does exist, because now we're calling something, and a flu becomes something, another name, for instance.
Sure.
And
A super flu.
What do you call this? It's not fact, because a fact...
They called it COVID.
Well, a fact would be like yesterday's a fact and tomorrow is the same fact. It's not transient perception, which so that's shaped. Did you know that ephemeral content is sort of given to you? Mm-hmm. Do you know what that means? It means, well, the computer has sensed what your weakness is.
Oh,
and
Google
so, for instance,
does it all the
men,
time.
that men are drawn to blood and gore, and it sees your weakness, and so it knows that you're interested in that. So it's going to present things far more like that to you, yes? Whereas if you were more interested in little puppy dogs little animals, and that was your thing, it's going to show you some more things like this. But you could see that most everybody sort of could be very distracted, and there couldn't be maybe too much that actually is about your motivation, which is to grow, to learn, to achieve, and to have recognition, which this is a built-in escalating zero. You know, you participate in this day in, day out. Well, all of us have some motivation, but you've got self-sentience, which is like a having added a framework where what's there isn't able, or it's endowed more or less with a certain amount of cognition. And so, for instance, if I said to you that we have a great uniformity because I want to control where you go, and if a fusion exists, which it does, it's going to get in the way of lots of things, isn't it? Like people were separate and they never knew each other. And then all of us get to know that. Well, it must mean that we obviously somebody wasn't there or something didn't exist, more or less, yes? Oh. And so no conversation is about something existing in the West here. And all of a sudden it exists. It's like, no, that's crazy. It didn't. That's just untrue, fully. Mm-hmm. You see, but it fits a picture, doesn't it, when we would say Columbus, you know, Columbus. Columbus.
Is that why we go to school in a bus?
Well, that's a law of commerce. It's the law of commerce. It's the god of commerce, Columbus. Okay. You know? Yeah, it just means the god over the ocean sort of thing of trade. Columbus.
Because you could say a boat was a bus back in those days.
Well, somebody all of a sudden says something was founded, but what the meaning of it is actually, but what was found. So if you obfuscate the fact that trams existed, they had mass transportation, had energy, large buildings and things, tall skyscrapers and things like this, and they were all on maps, very old maps, matter of fact, but you just wipe it all out and say, this is a new frontier, and suddenly the maps have wiped everything out, but you've drawn it, the outline of it, okay, so it must have got the outline, but what happened to all the interior? All of a sudden, you see, it's gone, and it's sort of like called the new frontier. But if you orphan children like they did, where did they get all these orphans from? But they took them from families, you see. So this is not an ordinary thing and not common law whatsoever, because what you made as a man is your property, is your proper cup of tea. It's not somebody else to have. That's something exclusively yours, and we all agree that a great self-autonomy exists, and we have a great strength where our self-autonomy is in our interrelatedness. But where self-autonomy is injured and somebody has to only get that back, well, how good is this? But you could value where somebody is and value it up to a higher value, and now you're back where you are with a value that's more interrelated, you see. But EU stress is kind of having had a good time but not knowing how to turn it off.
Okay.
Do you think that happens? Do you see that going on at all?
All the time.
Well, what happens? But that's a strategy's going on, isn't it? Like it's called a blowout strategy.
Oh, I did that last week.
Well, people do that. They'll sort of have a blowout and go, I'm not going to do that again. It's sort of like it's way too much.
I'm never drinking again.
Yeah, so if you do that in your mind, and you put a new movement experience in there, your mind can conceive new possibilities.
Yes.
But if you didn't know that what was eternal was empty space, because that's the only thing which is absolute, right?
Empty space.
Yeah,
Nothing
but it's not
is absolute.
Yeah. So what is absolute is something which is more etherical, and it's not something which we could feel, hear, or see per se.
It's definitely
a plasma.
Overwhelming.
It's a plasma, But eye awareness is more like in an ether that exists all the living. We all are witness to your birth and things, and this is part of you, and this is eternal. Okay. The other part of you is your body, and it was born, and that's 50% of yourself, and sort of like where you're in balance. Your orientation is exact 50% external, 50% internal. And then your referential index, meaning where you're getting information from, who did you get this information from, and how did that information come about? Did someone pay for that, like the Sumerian scrolls? Yes. Was it a rich man who got the scrolls done? Yes. And does this change your mind about what goes on? Yes, it does. You can see the motivation in the story for something to be sort of sculpted, so someone's going to take an advantage of others because they've got this inferior, superior idea put into your head.
There was definitely a lot of deep thinking back in the days, right? Like, say, when they were doing the Bible, right? Having to pick what stories you're going to put in the Bible. You know, you didn't put a story of, say, somebody who had a nasty habit of picking their nose and eating the boogers. That wasn't put in the Bible, right? Well, so you had to have some kind of deep thought back in those days to say, okay, this is a helpful story. This is a helpful story, you know.
Yeah, well, what gets passed on has got some positive good about it. There's something slightly ironical.
And what gets passed on is also...
but new information.
Obfuscated.
Well, where things have been covered over, like somebody was taught that a ghost existed.
And they don't.
Right.
But go on.
But then maybe even as an adult, they still can't quite go walk in the dark per se, and all sorts of things like this. They have scotophobia.
Ghosts scare me. I know they don't exist. They're not real, but they
fear of the unknown.
I get really scared.
You see. But life colloid taps 0 point, for instance, and if you knew that, you'd build equipment like the radiant energetic dynamo, which has one circuit,
I think I have one of those,
which bucks, and when it's bucking space, and so a great surge happens when you turn something on or off, and it's not, nothing is traveling there; it's conducted. It has to be passed across the space, and you've got a build-up of energy on one side.
Does it just
in relation
sit there
to the
until
other?
Something touches it?
And when it passes over, it does work, but it's right there. It's sort of conducted from the B field itself. It's just a bank of energy is present behind something, and like a slope downward is in front. And so this is sort of what's going on. So north negative always travels toward a south positive sort of thing. Inverse gravity is just sort of this principle, because our blood flows more or less uphill, and it's an interesting thing. You could be at the top of the mountain, for instance, and you can see water that comes out the very top.
What?
And it is because that's the lowest point. Though you could be looking down to the valleys, right? Water's coming out of the top of the mountain because there's a magnetic differential.
A magnetic differential.
There's a temperature differential.
A temper, okay.
And there is pressure differentials. So there's a lot of things where, as an obfuscation of our history, for instance, like if you wanted just people to breed like rabbits, maybe you would take away all their consciousness about children being born more from a form of discretion. So, for instance, if boys are born because the timing of the ovulation is more exact where the consummation is, it's likely that a male sperm could be, especially where an alkaline environment is. So gender, and these are things which could even be chosen more, you see, and things as such like this. But where we have knowledge, for a long time, I've pointed out, of course, that blood is made in your intestinal tract from a process of aggregation, fusion, and differentiation of colloid, and it's still kind of going along with this idea that blood was made in the bones. And in 1925, it was Sabin, Cunningham, and Doan that did that experiment. And it was just that they put these chickens under fasting, like starvation. And then they did see that some of the marrow
chickens
was what they found, a blood corpuscle in a marrow, and they extrapolated from that blood is made in the long bone, which doesn't mean that it isn't, but it's not, and it doesn't go through mitotic cell division to be created at all, and it goes through a process of aggregation, fusion, and differentiation in your lung and intestine, and where fat cells are, which could reverse differentiate back into a red blood corpuscle. And so where our cells didn't arise from mitotic cell division either, you see, we're still going along and thinking about something which was fudged to us, you see.
That's right. It was criminally
well, when you draw a picture of an ape that's climbing trees, and then with feet such, and then you slowly come to another sort of a foot, it's like it's not so quite like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But in pleomorphism, we can see that whales, for instance, used to be on the land.
What?
And their legs all eventually have come to be fins and things.
We had land whales.
Yeah, they had legs. And there's, we've found evidence of this, you see. So pleomorphism, you have to understand that there's a mutual lived assistance. And so, for instance,
so as we're coming out of the water, they're going into the water.
Can get an advantage to be somewhere itself, and it can be formed itself to make a light. So now a fish could see in the water because phosphorescent, luminescent bacteria came to be in its snout, and slow but sure it learned how to use that to turn a light on or off, so we could see through the mud, like the liagnatid fish, in the Borneo, the swamps of Borneo, for instance. So pleomorphism explains more how our species have arisen, and our primates. We out of all the primate have had a water existence for sure.
But we've been obfuscated into thinking that it's Darwinism.
Well, someone who pays for someone to do something could have a motivation behind it and an idea, and so it's where you have a great uniformity which didn't exist at all. The reason for why you would want to have that would be because you could just say people never knew each other, or that some line of evolution existed and it would be the survival of the fittest, rather than what's mutually lived in assistance is what nature is, you see.
So we need to start studying nursing homes, is what you're saying.
I think that people could learn a lot from where we are, but like lots of things that's like that might not necessarily be so good. It's sort of like what's happened to people who've just been alienated from their family, and ordinarily it would be like if you're in India and you're twitching a little bit, people are going to be tolerant relative a little. They're not going to just send you off to the hospital. Whereas if you twitch a little bit here, most people are going to say, no, you've to go to the hospital, sort of thing.
Well, there was a lot of alienation going on the last few days, depending on who you voted for. So a lot of people know exactly what you're talking about, talking about alienation.
Well, alienation is really where someone is removed from the product of their work, and it's like you're powerless, and that powerlessness is purposefully undermined. That's what pornography is. So that's
what the media is.
Prostitutes that commit legalized sin for entertainment, and things that's like this is an example of pornography.
Oh, I'm familiar.
When it is that you're going to hold an audience, right? How do you hold an audience in a movie?
Well, you can't lock the doors, right? But
no, how do you? Well, but you're doing something like that. But how do you hold the attention? Could you? So you can hold the attention if someone is endangered relative. Like if she's endangered, we'll pay attention the whole movie, right? And thousands of men could be killed up the front of it.
That's right.
And these are all expendable.
That's right.
And she's sort of expendable because if she ever commits adultery, it's sort of like in the story, usually it would be that she would be...
and it's funny that you bring
her character would be off.
It's funny that you bring up movies, because there have been movies that claim to be historical that are actually obfuscated. Huh? Right? Obfuscated.
Yeah, well, when you put a bit of truth in and mix it up, like JFK or 9/11 or 3/11 that happened in Japan, these things, these are all legal for a corpse that sees this corpse as its enemy to spy on and to do psyop operations on. See, so nations and businesses all could be controlled like by the monopoly. You can see, and this is obfuscated. It's sort of really not something that anybody is aware of, and it's sort of what you call is it. Would you say that some things aren't spoken? It's called a sacred cow.
Well, let me ask you this: so obfuscation or whatever can be done, but not on purpose, not purposefully, right? They just got something wrong. They may have gotten something wrong in their storytelling, but 9 times out of 10, it's on purpose, right?
Well, what happens when you're in a group and you've done an experiment and you asked, like there was 10 of you there in a line, and you just had to whisper quietly the message, and it was just like 6 words or something. But by the time it ended up getting to the second person, it was slightly changed. And by the time it got to the third person, it was even changed more. These are things which there's a lot of things could be going on. First, slippery slope, because we could take a fact to be, which is not, something could have happened at the same time frame, and so because of that we could think some cause and effect was because of the same time frame. That's called ad hoc. It could be bandwagon appeal where, well, after somebody, a society, sort of group of people have interpreted something, someone else doesn't want to go against what that is per se.
No,
so it sort of causes a selective bias,
especially if you're lost and you're locked out.
And if someone's really not doing the right thing per se, like currency is being undermined, would this be the reason why that's not something that's ever been brought up by the United Nations?
Oh, they bring up the stuff all the time.
Oh, about banking?
Oh, the United Nations. Oh my gosh.
No, but banking.
I just want them to do what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But, yeah, that's right. But what about singers and other people? Do they talk about the crisis of banking and money mechanic?
Oh my gosh, that's another episode. We can't talk about that. But it is an example of
But if you're an
obfuscation.
entertainer, you might not. But if also, too, you're working for one person, you might be able to say that apparently everything is okay because this election was okay. And so now all elections kind of may be okay.
Here's the
or
deal.
some aren't.
Here's the deal. The 2020 election was rigged. They didn't mess with this one so that they can say, see, it wasn't rigged. See, election's real. Because they plan on rigging the next election.
So when is it ever that one person owns both teams is not rigged?
Do what? What?
If you were betting on a team like soccer or football, whatever.
The betting itself is rigged.
No. Well, I know. I only asked you the question, which is true, where one person owns 2 or 3 teams.
Mm-hmm. And you want them to lose?
No, it's just that we don't want that necessarily. Where one man owns 3 teams.
Well,
so when would you say that wouldn't be rigged?
Right?
No, but when would you say that
Never,
wouldn't be rigged?
Ever.
Well, maybe not, but why would you want to have such a conflicted interest? Even if it wasn't, you still wouldn't want to have that conflicted interest. And
I don't think I'll have to worry about that.
But you see that control, as you point out, can't be done all the time. It's done in spurts.
Okay.
And so that if I own the system in China and I own it in Russia and I own every other nation, it's okay they mess up. I might want them to mess up, or I might want not for something to occur, or gee, isn't it that the Denver murals just have Khazar sort of blood, more or less? And,
who made that
and
decision?
Chinese that are working in factories, and that's it, and everybody else is annihilated?
Mm-hmm. It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, in history, we can see that a race of people just got wiped out from craziness, like the Tasmanian Aboriginals, for instance, and that wasn't a great care for of any nature. It's sort of like would be just like what happened because no care necessarily was because it wasn't thought through. No idea was, but was it? Yes, because it was just that you wouldn't have anyone to negotiate with per se. You see?
Sure, yeah.
So, the stupidity that happens when somebody is going to not get a benefit themselves, Johnny's going to march off to war, but someone else is going to get a benefit, is a certain form of stupidity where someone only is getting a benefit themselves and we don't get a benefit. That's another form of stupidity. Another form of stupidity is where you're doing something and honest to God, you're not getting any benefit at all, and neither are we. So that's a pretty crazy form of
good example
stupidity. Yes,
a bad joke.
It's
great example.
It's the deeper form of stupidity, which is the most dangerous. So criminals, because something is more predictive, are less dangerous than ignorant people who are acting. The behaviour is stupid. You see. So, where you and I are the creditor of everything that's spent, but you would know the money mechanic behind it, you wouldn't let someone take over what that is, because you could see that's the control outright of everything, isn't it? And isn't it that the reason why currency comes to be set the way that it is and what's set there in the Constitution in the way that people thought back then? But the Constitution wasn't really the document which would be something which we wanted. It would be something which the corporation wrote for itself eventually and came up with this. And a constitutor would be someone who's actually taking money from someone and giving it to someone else. That's the definition. So something was written for them, for themselves, and they would ignore that or change it or change the code around and things in the interpretedness of it. And then who's there to get to deal with anything like that when there are 60, 70, 80 attorneys all against you and they work for the Crown in other countries or the state here, and it's all by corpus delicti, meaning nobody is behind that claim. It's just a presupposition that something can exist because you are an employee and we demand certain things that exist, but no harm, injury, cost or damage was to anyone. But it's presupposed that something exists, you see. So this is an example of the nature not being talked about and going on to a cause and effect about something, but not talking about the nature of the cause and effect. The nature of the cause and effect would be like, what rights do you have, and are you under an employee contract? Are you latched under a contract? And were you born latched under a contract? And if that happened, and you didn't agree to that, now when you're older, you're looking and seeing that there's all sorts of crimes that have been committed. And is it that these are charges which just haven't been discharged?
Sure.
That's the question. Is it charges which haven't been discharged? But ordinary in nature, everything is zeroed out, isn't it? I mean, right?
A lot of people would like that.
Well, a ladybird, is she got the bother of the bank that comes up against herself and energy and where she's directing this?
Hell no.
No. And so isn't it that common sense is that that's what we care for ourselves fully, because we cannot accept that we don't have the same right, more or less, that an animal might itself to be left alone relative. But would one day it be safe to leave an animal at the farm?
You would hope so.
So if I make a lot of money because I sell things, we all would agree that maybe that would be certain that there's only positions that you could probably not be in. Why? Because you'd have conflicted interest, wouldn't you?
Sure.
What about Congress? Everyone there has a massive interest in getting money and profit from pharmaceuticals. And if you were controlling things, would you have done that?
Well, here's the deal. A lot of people don't realize that once you get there, it's a whole different world that you want to adapt to and learn. That way you can be good at it. But as you do that,
what if
you become it?
But what if the big Pfizer?
And if I was,
what if it's the big Pfizer that's
if I was one of them,
brought to you?
I'd be the most corrupt.
If we could just only see everything
I would sell my vote to the highest bidder. But
the one thing is
not on purpose.
Pharmaceuticals started to take over lots of advertising space everywhere, and they're the biggest spenders on things, a lot. But then if you're in Congress, are you just working for them a bit because you've got conflicted interest? We don't care for conflicted interest. The McCarthy law was that you're not supposed to go behind doors privately where people are and then still say that you don't have conflicted interest.
Oh, I like that.
Also, and an officer of the government, more or less, has to have an anti-bribery oath. And also,
don't you dare ask for something.
A foreign insurance registration insurance.
That's why you'll never have term limits. They're not going to limit the
these
power
are things which are securities often that goes on like a CUSP ticket, like a bill, like a parking ticket is a CUSP number, and it's going to go and be fractionally reserved because it's not going to get. It's going to get paid but not discharged.
Sure. And here's the deal, though.
Well, we have a system that could be corrected, you see.
You're never going to get term limits because why? Why would you limit your opportunities to make so much money? And you're asking the very people to limit their term limits. The ones that are going to do
none of us care for a fox being put in charge of the chickens.
Here's
you don't
the
put the
And here's why it's so important. We have
predatorial environment.
You got two bills to pick from to vote for, right? One is going to be great for America, right? But the other one's also going to be great for America. However, it's going to put more money in your pocket. It's going to line your pockets. You might get rich off of it.
So you could have a Franklin cover-up.
So why not vote for this one that's going to make
and a stand-down order at the local police station so that no one would investigate anymore? And where did the stand-down order come from? Because it is a stand-down order.
Soros-backed DAs. That's where it came from.
Yeah, but you see, gold fingering itself isn't right per se. Being a lone ranger in the theatre of operation also isn't right, is it?
Well, it is. It is in television.
These are things like if you have a lone ranger, you could manipulate people a bit, couldn't you? It'd appear to do good, but not really.
Why would a lawman wear a mask?
There's all sorts of things going on, but you've got the double-faced ghost, which could be nodding their head yes, but saying no, you see.
Mm-hmm. I do it all the time.
And that could be sequentially done as an incongruency, or could be simultaneous more as an incongruency. Different types of incongruency there. But a parallel processing is more where something is supportive, relative, but congruent. Two people dissociated could be perfectly congruent with each other. Congruency is just a parallel processing, which is what goes on where integration is. Integration really is more where there's a flow between the parts. You and I, if we're left to be more, we've got a great intuition, and our great value is, as a strength of society in a golden age, is for things to be created that's innovative, incredible, for our lives all to be better. So if it's not said, how did money get created from your birth certificate, and what's the reason why that number is the number that's on money, and how did you get anything from it? The point is that you've never been given any consideration, and someone else has used that account themselves, a private organisation, and we're okay by them doing it because we've been given a service, but that's not from here. It's sort of far away. You see? And so decentralisation is a better form of governance when you start to think about it. And that would be then straight up you and I more customer-based, voting for currency by looking at areas that money should be spent and then having that spent. And so verified vote is far more effective because you've got quorum sensing in a system. But basically, the system that's existed has been set up and it wasn't anything like, well, a military-industrial complex is not anything you and I would ever have selected. You're a stranger to that. It doesn't have a contract with you, you see.
And that doesn't have a conscience.
Yeah, but in all the other nations of the earth, except for 5, pretty much most every nation now is under a
corporation.
It's under a code.
A code.
And that everybody is latched by having a contract, and that you're supposed to have acted upon that contract. But it's really unconscionable act that anyone would have made a contract with you as a baby.
Maybe it's our source code. Anyways, good point. The criminal obfuscation of our history. Money has a lot to do with it. Money has a lot to do with it because it allowed people to get bought.
Well, and offices for rent, like you were pointing out, like the president's offices for rent, that's really not a proper circumstance at all, you see?
But it's true.
Yes, that's right. So a lot of things really we should correct, and where we're sitting where we can, it really is where we sit, which we do above the Legislative Assembly of the state. And it's just 26 people that meet, and you have a presentment, and you're just looking into government transgression. And so these are things which is in Article 3 and Article 4, that this is over a contract. So these are, of course, which is slowly been not used because that's the right side of the court, and only the left side has been used, the debtor side, and everybody is sort of controlled as chattel, where the picture is there, you see. And so that's how they took children away from parents that came here, and they had so many orphans, and they did that to certain bodies of people that came.
Well, that's happening with immigration right now, right? It's just a free-for-all. A lot of kids are being separated from the get-go as soon as they say, I'm going to the U.S. And then...
Yeah, so it's a really sad state of affair where someone isn't able to manage something where they are, and they actually have to be gone from their family and things such like this. It's really incredibly brave, as you point out, but there's been times where massive migrations have occurred, and you can see reasons why, and it's a political strife and things like that all of a sudden cause France to become more Muslim, let's say, or England to become more Muslim, let's say, or Ireland to become more Muslim, let's say, and people start to wear balaclavas, and it's okay to go into the coffee shop and not show your face. We start to get used to the idea that it'll be okay to hide your face, this sort of thing, and balaclavas will start to be worn. But
that's another episode there.
That you see, so deviant behaviour often is just made conditioned to be, we're accepting it, but not really, no. You see, because something is common sense which isn't being applied. You see what I mean?
Yes, I do.
So you can see first that who's paying the piper, would you say, is running the show?
Absolutely, because guess what? I'm not paying the piper, and I'm not running anything.
Well, are we? Because you're sitting back, and that's a type of running things. Yes, it is.
Really?
Yeah, and also to the idea that we haven't thought about leadership and all sorts of leadership, and actually the idea of quorum sensing and the idea of verifiedness versus lying through the sense, which is a low order of a fact. And going along with something where somebody's only just got presuppositions, which is square, which is fictional, and no fact is going to be tried or heard, and it's just a friendly suit that relate to banking, the issue of something a bill being paid for the service of what this is, and all people there giving argument, and that not anything which is it's all to do with the cause and effect, but not talking about the nature of the action, the nature. You see the nature. So in the nature of things, you would be looking to see, are you under, are you belong to the military, which you don't? Are you part of a militia? No, you're not. You see, so
if I was, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. But here's the deal, right?
Yeah, but why wouldn't you? Because you're really fooling yourself to now have hustings put over you. Yeah, yeah, because you just said, you're somebody who we don't know. You're not telling the truth. So after that, you see, you're not credible.
Okay, you need to settle down. I'm not hustling anybody.
No. I'm just saying this is what happens. but no, for me or anyone, it's what your credibility is. It's sort of really like what's repeatable. What is a pattern repeatable? I mean, that's a reputation.
Yeah.
A reputation is the only thing that actually follows someone through their grave.
That's right.
Everything else kind of really doesn't. People want to take possessions and things like this, but in fact it's your reputation that actually
costs the most.
Is what, yeah, exactly.
Now, you brought up leadership, which is a great point of people should be thinking more about leadership, because now that I know my cells are individually conscious and sentient, they're going to want a strong leader. So I got to start thinking about that.
Oh, yeah, you're the captain of the ship.
That's right.
But let's see, what you're introducing to us.
Come across as a good leader.
Yeah, right. Well,
not some wimp.
This is consensus. So you're starting with, I'm going to see that consensus exists, and I'm building decision-making from consensus.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me. That's a form of decision making. It's better than Robert's rules. It actually really is vetting what could be wrong about the idea, what could be right. I mean, wrong, and you're vetting the whole thing. And by doing that, you're gaining a degree of consensus because you're putting the view out. We make better decisions. We all stand by things far more when we do this. And it's not easy for us to stand by something where only one person more or less would be making a decision per se, you see. But circumstance sometimes could be that, should be wise, yeah, maybe. But basically, we all don't need, like swans, they don't need a parliament.
How long does a cell live for?
A senate.
The longest cells in our body, how long do they live for?
Let's talk about a corpuscle because it does a lot of work. And that's not a cell and has no DNA in it. What? That's the red blood.
But does that have a
corpuscle? It's not a cell.
Does a corpuscle does not have a?
Doesn't have its DNA in there. No,
so
no
it doesn't
DNA.
have a conscience.
Yes, it does.
What?
It has sentience, absolutely.
Okay.
Because you've got a brain of a memory of a brain. And that membrane is its structure, you see, plus the structure that it has inside.
How long does it live for?
Red blood corpuscle on average could be around 120 days or something.
Really?
If it were in good stead and things.
So if I have a positive message, I can recycle it every 6 months.
Well, iron and everything you are, believe it or not. The body does everything it can to recycle things for sure.
Okay.
And then you're making more neurotransmitter because now you're going to have a bit more transpersonal perception. But if you didn't make neurotransmitters because that was knocked out, suddenly that'd be kind of missing, right? An interesting thing thing where that has occurred, like from alcohol, all sorts of things that can have occurred.
Well,
but you'll notice that it is because someone only can come up with a name, place, and time, and that's the most boring thing. People want to flee the scene where
right.
somebody comes up on the stage and they've only got name, place, or time stuff. That's the most boring thing. But if we knew that, then we wouldn't put that out there at all, you see. Mm-hmm. So when we start to become more aware ourselves, certainly new information adjusts the way we do things.
Yeah. And guess what? As the leader of your conscious selves, you have to be transparent. You can't BS yourselves. They know what's up.
Well, your awareness of your own use of the vestibular sense, which is forward, back, up, down, on, off, turning. These are all predicating the vestibular sense, like to see what I mean, to get a picture, to get a frame of reference, to look. These are visual. The vestibular sense is
Mount vestibulus.
You're using it to go toward and having it within, and so you're remaining associated versus I'm getting away from, and so that's dissociated, or I'm looking outside at, so that's sort of also dissociated. Being associated would be more being in the present and not sort of having any dialogue per se.
Speaking of Mount Vestibulus, which destroyed Pompeii, it was just in the news that some of the famous corpses of Pompeii were thought to be women, and they're actually men. So this whole gender thing has been going on for a long time.
Well, what is an interesting fact is if you look into history, you'll see that a Roman recording of history is on a date which is close to a date, but it would go back 1,000 years, and then someone kind of just makes a note that they see a mountain blow, which they do what they can to cause 1,000 years to be wiped out in history. And so we lose the date relative because we've got a date that comes along. But when you look at that date that was written into history, it was written by a military commander, and it was that was noted, but no one in the area, anyone else reports this. So if it did occur, you would have lots of reports independent around, isolated. They would have said the same event.
We need honest commanders.
But I'm only just saying that a soldier is doing what he or she is asked to do relative, and they
do. Step
forward to become an infant, to not be in the mind at all, be controlled, an infantry, so a tree of infants. So, but a man or a woman was there to step forward, you see,
to become like
part of an infant.
Harris.
Well, you can see that you've got a lot of obfuscation going on, which, how could you say that this isn't so? You'd have to say that it is, because a monopoly exists, basically, you see. So that's not a conspiracy. It doesn't need a conspiracy.
Well, that's great. I kind of like conspiracies. They're entertaining because some of them, they sound amazing and legit. And then some of them are so outlandish and crazy. You're like, are you serious? This is
no, but you see, them doesn't exist, but a story isn't them.
They exist.
No, I know. But let's see. You've got things which are psyops, and to obscure the truth, and that's legal to do on another corporation that's your enemy. And so everyone's doing that to each other, and that's not proper international law, you see. But is it international law that somebody said, well, this corpse is against us, don't we have a right to defend ourselves? But you see, this is not seeking agreement. If you seek agreement, this is intelligent. Anybody seeking agreement is obvious that you're looking at what's going on, and this is intelligent as people seeking agreement. We seek agreement immediately with your adversary. This is sort of really what is spiritual, right? And when we don't do that, it's sort of like something has gone on in the conditioning of things, isn't it? What will have happened where somebody fell in love with a slave servant monkey? Like,
happens all the time.
Learned helpless. How do you heal that, though?
Well, that's a tough one. I'll have to get back to you.
Well, it's integrating two parts. One is loving, isn't it? And you could have alternative ways to learn how to love more so that you can grow that part of value up. The other part is that there's a terror of what it hasn't been acknowledged, and the acknowledgement of what this is what's needed. And so once this is acknowledged more and lovingness has existed where, you've got a union of dichotomy, that's what that means. You could visit all this with perfect detachment, being a visitor, being an up time. Matter of fact, like exceptional brain usage has an epsilon wave. Have you heard about that at all?
No, I've never heard that before.
It shows up every 11 seconds.
Really?
There's a lambda wave that shows up, every...
a lambda
below
wave
2 or 3 seconds.
It shows up in our head every 11 seconds?
Yeah.
And it lasts about 2 or 3 seconds?
No, these are very much more flat and takes time. Can you see it? It didn't go up and down real quick. Yeah? It actually was more flat. But what's it carrying? It's carrying a gamma wave.
Our subconscious, maybe?
It's carrying gamma wave.
Okay.
So where somebody's empty inside, there's the area in the frontal cortex on both sides of the brain has areas which is to do with inhibition and modifying the things that you do. And these areas are quiet where exceptional brain function is, meaning that there's not anything inhibiting much. Another area of the brain that inhibits is the left occipital lobe. And that area, parietal area, the parietal area, is an area also which is sort of silent, which is not, it's, making associations that is inhibiting. These are things, the centers which are quiet in a brain where exceptional brain function is. The other thing is that interest and pleasure has existed, which is cultivated, and this causes someone to be more in their frontal cortex, so you're getting more whole brain patterning. So where you have rapport, you're going to be able to get more done, basically. And where you don't have rapport, it's sort of like you don't have power, you see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, we got a lot more to talk about. So you'll just have to keep staying tuned and see what we talk about next. Don't forget to subscribe. And I'm going to leave you with a little something, okay? And it is I can't remember what it was. Dr. Jubb, leave us with something to think about, or something wonderful to do, something simple to do to better our life.
Yeah. Well, the master of self is the servant, and something is below in a support position, isn't it? And behind, and these are the positions where someone is in a support, and then this is the master. And so how one keeps self-company is this which you have inside. And of course, this could be drawing company to you because it is about how you keep company, or it could be something else. Something is a math and it adds up, or it doesn't add up. And something could be more well-formed, yes? And things could be said and are not really well-formed. And something could be logical more, and so these are areas which we've got some good time to spend as we chat about this.
There you go, folks. And I remembered what I was going to say. Keep it light and smile. Take us out, Dr. Jubb.